This is Dr. Ben White with the Rational Wellness Podcast, bringing you the cutting edge information on health and nutrition from the latest scientific research and by interviewing the top experts in the field. Please subscribe to the Rational Wellness Podcast on iTunes and YouTube, and sign up for my free ebook on my website by going to drwhites.com. Let's get started on your road to better health. Hello, Rational Wellness Podcasters. Dr. Ben White here. Thank you so much for joining me again today for another episode of the Rational Wellness Podcast. For those of you who enjoy listening to it, please go to iTunes and give us a ratings and review so more people can find out about the Rational Wellness Podcast. Today, I'll be speaking with Tricia Nelson about emotional eating and the reason why so many conventional nutrition weight loss programs fail for so many clients, including, I'm sure, some of mine. As a functional medicine practitioner, I find myself often getting caught up in intellectual, left-brain discussions, and even arguments about which diet plans are most effective for promoting weight loss and also for health. But seldom do I spend a lot of time thinking about the various emotional reasons why people eat. Tricia Nelson lost 50 pounds by identifying and healing the underlying causes of her emotional eating. Tricia's an emotional eating expert and author of the #1 best-selling book, Heal Your Hunger, 7 Simple Steps to End Emotional Eating Now. And she's also the host of the popular podcast, The Heal Your Hunger Show. Tricia, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's so awesome to be here. Thank you, Ben, for having me.
Great. So can you tell us a little bit about your own personal journey with emotional eating?
You bet. Yeah, all my work comes really from my experience of having first been an emotional eater, and then I've spent 30 years helping other emotional eaters. But, it started out, I think, as far back as I can remember. I was obsessed with food and loved to eat, and so food was like a big deal to me. I mean, it's important to everybody, but to me, it was super important. So I love to cook. I love to eat. I love to serve food to others. It was all I thought about. And unfortunately, I was one of those people that gained weight really easily. So I'd have this roll on my tummy that I'd scrunch up in my hands and have these terrible thoughts like cutting it off. Like you cut the fat off the side of a steak, I'm like, I wonder if I could do this. It's just fat, right? Thank God I didn't try that. And then, and I thought about getting like a disease, like some crazy disease where I'd automatically lose weight, and I wouldn't have to try.
Start eating parasites.
Oh God. And then I even thought about joining the Army, where I'd be forced to go through boot camp because I hated to exercise. So, I was out there. I was thinking some pretty crazy thoughts just because I was that out of control with food. Like I couldn't control my weight and really the amounts that I ate. And so I was frustrated, and I tried a lot of different things. I tried pills and potions and lotions and, of course, weight loss programs and exercise programs and 12-step programs. I even went to an eating disorders therapist. So, I put in a really good, college try in doing something about my weight and my eating, and nothing I tried worked for any length of time. And I would always, I knew to lose weight. I would lose weight, but I'd always gain the weight back, and I had like 4 different size pants in my closet because I never knew what size I was going to be. And so it was really a painful and very private struggle for me. I mean, it was obvious I was overweight, but people didn't know, I carried it well, and I had, I was happy generally on the outside. So people didn't know what an internal struggle it was for me. And it is very, for most people, it's a very isolating thing. So I didn't know what to do about it. And what happened is that I found someone who could really help me. And what I began to learn is that my problem had nothing to do with food and had everything to do with emotional eating, and really those underlying causes of what was driving me to crave, the ooey gooey chewy foods and to crave unhealthy amounts. And when I started really going to the heart of the matter, that's when I began to lose weight and be able to keep it off. So it's really about, my business is called Heal Your Hunger, because it's really that deeper hunger that people, if they're emotional eaters, they really need to heal. So as I said, for 30 years now, I've been blessed to be able to share, my system for overcoming emotional eating with people around the globe.
How did someone know if they're an emotional eater? And as a doctor, how do you determine that someone's an emotional eater?
It's a great question. I think as a doctor, it's really important to listen for people who are sort of complaining about being out of control around certain foods. They can't stop eating certain foods. I actually have a quiz that I give to doctors if they use my program in their practice, which gives their patients emotional, support to go through my program, which helps them follow through with the doctor's protocols. I have a quiz, and I also have it on my website, and it's, are you an emotional eater or a food addict? And basically my feeling is that most, I think as a population or as a species, we are emotional eaters. I mean, we have an emotional attachment to food, which makes us want to eat. It feels good. It's comforting. It's a nice experience. But the people who are actually emotional eaters, in a more dangerous level, they are people who are using food for emotional reasons to really avoid feelings. They're using food so they can escape themselves and escape experiences they don't want to feel. And so that's when it becomes a habit, and really gets out of control. And so I always say it's a spectrum. Everybody's an emotional eater. On the lower end is emotional eating, and then it gets, it basically depends on the consequences, whether somebody can't stop it, they feel out of control regularly, they're chronically overweight, no matter what they do. And then on the high end of the spectrum is really food addiction. And I was a food addict for sure, where I would literally binge and, I could pack away 4,000 calories in a sitting. I get a bunch of carbs and ice cream and brownies and, candy and whatever, sit in front of my favorite TV show and just go to town. That's serious, addictive habit, where then I don't want to go out, and be with friends. I don't want to be seen at the beach, forget about it, And so it really starts to affect your life and your choices. People can lose their jobs because of their weight. Either they're being discriminated against because of their weight, or they're not showing up for their job. They're hungover. Literally, you can have a sugar hangover, a binge hangover. You don't want to go to your job. You're depressed. I feel like so many people who complain of depression are emotional eaters, and they're just, and they're in that terrible cycle of overeating where they hate themselves. They hate themselves and they hate their lives because of what they're doing with food. It's so shameful and so dark. It can get really dark, just like an alcoholic with alcohol, and so that's really where it's in the addiction category, or place on the spectrum. So my quiz, to answer your question, is a great place to start in finding out, where are you on the spectrum, and where you are is going to determine what actions you need to take.
So that quiz will tell you whether you're an emotional eater or a food addict?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, great. And can you send me that link?
Yes, I'd be happy to.
Okay. So what does it mean physiologically if somebody's addicted to food? What exactly is happening inside in their nervous system or their...
Yeah, well, my experience is most people who are emotional eaters are having a physical reaction, usually to sugar. Okay, so most emotional eaters, not all emotional eaters, there are some that binge on protein, on big slices of meat, but most emotional eaters in my experience definitely have a carb addiction, a carb and sugar addiction, which is essentially a sugar addiction, right? Yeah. And so and they just can't leave it alone. And they swear off of sugar, and then all it takes is one bite to set off that cycle of craving. And it is a physical thing. And I've been through it, where if I eat sugar, if there's even sugar in a salad dressing or something, it makes me more prone to want more or crave more, because it's definitely a physical reaction. If people are more sensitive to sugar than your average person. And I know for myself, I'm very sensitive to alcohol as well. I cannot drink alcohol without over drinking alcohol. And I feel like it's the same. It's really the same reason I can't eat sugar is because alcohol is the most refined form of sugar anyway. So it's definitely a physical thing where it sets up a craving that makes it incredibly hard for somebody to control how much they eat. So it's physical and emotional and mental, and spiritual all in one. But definitely there's, the physical aspect is something to definitely pay attention to, because I find that if I eat more of a paleo type diet and we're not
lower carb approach.
Yes. Yeah. Lower carbs is going to make it so much easier to stay on a healthy plan, because I'm not teasing my body with carbs and sugars that make it harder to say no.
Interesting. I was reading one of your blog posts where you were talking about some of the neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin and glutamate. Can you explain how these affect emotional eating?
Probably not as well as you could. But definitely, people who are emotional eaters typically do have neurotransmitters that are off, and they're depleted and they are seeking, that's where that carb craving will come in, needing the serotonin effect. Plus, I find that emotional eaters are very prone to anxiety. And so we tend to be worriers and overthinkers. And that's where that carb, element can help as well, as it calms us down. It gives us that sedative effect, that we really need. There are better ways to get it, like through meditation and prayer and walking and things. But, that quick fix of that carb craving, often is on account of some depletion in neurotransmitters.
Do you ever test or try to evaluate neurotransmitters to see if that's part of the mix?
I definitely recommend it to people, but that's not my forte. So okay. I'm not a doctor. I'm really an emotional eating expert, and I know that can be part of it. I think it's really important for people to get their hormones checked, their neurotransmitters checked, because that can definitely support somebody in healing. But my experience is if somebody's chronically overweight or chronically struggles with their weight, that's not going to fix them. Getting that stuff in line, is not the full picture. If they do that and they get the support for emotional eating, then you've got a much more complete, healing package.
Right. Can you explain how some foods excite the opiate receptors in our brain in the same way that pain medications do?
Well, I just know from experience that, like I was talking about with sugar, definitely it affects the reward center in our brain where, literally it's been proven that sugar is as addictive as heroin, for the very same reason where you feed that reward center, it gets all lit up, and then you need to keep doing it to get that same level of happiness or a sense of fulfillment and excitement. And just like, heroin or another drug, in the effect on your brain, you need more of it in order to, get that same hit, that same effect, which is why it's a progressive condition, just like it is with alcohol, just like it is with drugs, where you need more of that sugar, you need more of that carb effect in order to achieve the same thing. And you can get withdrawal symptoms just like you would a drug as well. You take it away from the mouth. They've proven you take sugar from the mice and their teeth chatter. They're racing. Their hearts are racing. They've got the same withdrawal effect and that drugs have on the body as well. And so, I've experienced all of that. Not my teeth chattering, but I'm just saying that sense of withdrawal, definitely headaches, lethargy, things where if I'm detoxing off of sugar, it's not pretty for a few days. There's 4 days of hell of detoxing off of sugar because I was addicted, no question about it.
How do you detox off of sugar?
Well, I mean, my experience is abstinence. Like you just, I mean, the only way to do it, and you know, you don't really titrate it. You just stop eating it.
Okay.
But know that, you know, I mean, maybe some people go through more serious withdrawal symptoms. For me, it's always been like a headache and needing to drink lots of water. So that's what I recommend to people. But definitely supplementation as well is super, super helpful. But it's really, you know, it's the hard way. You know, that's the best way, is doing it the hard way and just, you know, quitting cold turkey. But I really teach people about looking at their labels, checking their labels, and making sure they're not getting sugar that they don't even really, you know, when people are trying to be good and there's sugar, like, or corn syrup in their salad dressing or their spaghetti sauce.
Yeah.
It's so depressing because they are, you know, with all full intention wanting to be sugar free, but there's so much sugar and so many hidden sugars in the foods that we eat that they're shooting themselves in the foot and they don't even know it. They're, you know, it's like, geez, you know, here I am trying to be good and I'm still getting screwed by even, you know.
It's so hard to find foods without sugar. Like you're talking about salad dressings and, you know, sauces. And I was just looking for my wife wanted some hemp protein powder, and almost every product on the market had some kind of sugar, even if it was just a little bit of stevia. And she said, you know, just get me hemp protein powder. It was hard to find one that didn't have any sweetener.
It is so true. I mean, I do love stevia. I always say stevia at least is, you know, not triggering physically, generally speaking, but it's, you know, it isn't easy to find anything that's unsweetened. But for an emotional eater who loves sweet, and I am one, I always say, you know, stevia is God's gift to emotional eaters, because at least there's something that doesn't have like an adverse side effect.
Right.
You know, but you still get the sweet taste.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't really have a problem with, you know, moderate amounts of stevia. It seems to work fine for me and most of my clients. So how do you differentiate between emotional and physical hunger? When is it, you know, become emotional? How do you know?
Well, I think it's really important that, first of all, emotional eaters are typically medicating themselves, and I'll go into that a little bit, and then I'll answer your question more directly. But, you know, there are three primary reasons why people really eat or overeat, or the three primary emotions that they eat over. And one is, I call it the PEP test. So the P stands for painkiller. So they're eating over pain, and that's emotional pain, you know, and it doesn't have to be pain like, I'm dying, but it's like, you know, uncomfortable feelings, like you're in a job that's not really the right fit for you. So you're kind of miserable every day that you go to work, or you're in a relationship that's really trying, like really hard and stressful. So that creates some emotional pain. And that's what people medicate over, is like, they're not happy, they're not fulfilled, and they're very uncomfortable over some situation. Perhaps they have a death in the family or something. So there's some emotional pain that people are anesthetizing with food. The E in the PEP test stands for escape. So sometimes emotional eaters, it's like, emotional eaters are typically super responsible. So, you know, you have your alcoholic who, you know, wherever there's an alcoholic, there's usually an emotional eater. So you have an alcoholic who's like totally irresponsible and blowing off appointments and, you know, just messing up the family, you know, structure or rhythm or whatever. But then you have the emotional eater that's always there picking up the pieces, you know, always super responsible, always on time to work. You know, and that's how emotional eaters typically are. But it gets tiring because we're always like do-gooders, you know, we're always doing the right thing. And we get so tired, and it's like eating is like our escape. It's like, you know, I want to shut the world out. Like, I need me time, right? And so we get our TV, we get our favorite goodies, and it's like, just, we want the world to go away. So, and oftentimes that's on account of fear too. Emotional eaters have a lot of fear. And so a lot of times we're eating to escape fear as well. Like, it's like life is overwhelming to us. And the last letter P in the PEP test stands for punishment. And emotional eaters typically are very guilt prone, you know, because we're emotional eaters, we're very emotional. And so we typically feel things at a deeper level than your average person. And so we typically feel guilty over things. So we're constantly beating the crap out of ourselves for things we've said, things we've done, things we haven't done. And oftentimes food is a way for us to punish ourselves. And it's like we want to escape the self, flagellation that goes on in our head, but we also want to punish ourselves as well. So these are the three primary drivers, is I would say pain, fear, and guilt. So back to your question about, how do you know if you're emotionally hungry or physically hungry? People are typically grazing. Emotional eaters are good grazers, where we're eating throughout the day, because wherever there's food, it's like we're totally drawn to it. So if we're at work, workplaces are like the unhealthiest places for emotional eaters, because everybody's bringing in their leftovers from the party to the kitchen, right? That's all in the kitchen. Or there's candy jars throughout the office. It's like, and all day long we're grazing, we're eating, our hands are in the candy jar all the time. So we're eating all the time. And what I say is, one of the best ways to know whether you're physically hungry or emotionally hungry is to not graze, but eat 3 meals with nothing in between. I call it 3-meal magic. And what's important about this is it's not as a diet. It's not a food plan. And I tell my clients this, I'm like, do it as a way for you to get in touch with your emotions. Because if you're grazing all day, anesthetizing that pain, fear, and guilt, you don't know what you're feeling, and you don't know whether it's physical or emotional. And I will say, emotional hunger feels a lot like physical hunger. It's incredible to me sometimes. But because I eat 3 meals and I don't eat in between, what it looks like then is that, around 10 o'clock in the morning, if I'm sitting there having this conversation with myself saying, I'm so hungry, like all of a sudden I'm like, I got to go to the refrigerator. There's got to be something in there for me. I have this conversation with myself and I say, gee, Tricia, it's 10 in the morning. You had breakfast a few hours ago, or maybe 3 hours ago. You're probably not starving like you're telling yourself you are. In which case, let's do a little sleuthing and see what pain, fear, and guilt's coming up for you. Where are you feeling uncomfortable? What are you trying to anesthetize? But see, if I didn't have that space between my meals, I wouldn't be able to do that sleuthing work. I wouldn't be able to know what emotions I was feeling. I would just totally convince myself I'm physically hungry. And that's why this is so important to put space between the meals, not only because it's good for your digestion, but it really does inform you about what's going on emotionally. So I know that was a long answer, but it's just really important that emotional eaters do put some boundaries around their meals so they can start getting in touch with themselves and their true emotions.
Well, if eating 3 meals without snacks is good for emotional eaters, would eating 2 meals be even better? Because now intermittent fasting is so popular, and now a lot of people are skipping breakfast, and that seems to be the key to longevity.
Yeah, but I say no to that if you're an emotional eater. Okay, so the science says great, but you can still get that intermittent effect with 3 meals with nothing in between. I eat dinner around 5:30, and I'm not eating breakfast till 6:30 or 7. There you've got 13 plus hours. I've gotten some good intermittent fasting in there. Sure. But 2 meals is really a setup for an emotional eater, because you can understand emotional eaters are great at skipping meals, okay? It's like we take the cake on this, pardon the pun. but emotional eaters are always trying to skip meals to try to hack their weight loss, okay? Hack the system. And it's totally a setup, and that's why emotional eaters who skip meals are typically, larger, in weight than people who don't skip meals, and it's counterintuitive. You think, oh, I'm going to skip breakfast. I'm telling you, I've been doing this for 30 years and I still have that little bugger in my head that's like, ooh, maybe I'll lose some weight if I skip this meal. But my body is not going to stand for it. And neither will my mental, capacity, because what happens is we get hungry and then we're dysregulated because we're over hungry and we end up overeating. And you don't beat the system that way. You actually beat the system when you have your 3 meals, when the meals are pretty much the same amounts each meal, because then you can get an idea of what full means if you're having the same amounts in each of your 3 meals. But I rarely see somebody win by just eating 2 or 1 meal. It's just Getting too over hungry is not good for an emotional eater.
So how do you stop being an emotional eater? What are some concrete tools that can help?
Well, I think it's really important, first of all, to get support. I don't find that anybody can really successfully do this alone. And this is why, I do what I do with Heal Your Hunger is I give people a lot of community. In my program, I have a program called 10 Weeks to Freedom from Emotional Eating, and it's modules that people learn about emotional eating. They learn about the emotions underneath, but there's also a big element of community where we have live calls weekly together, people all around the world who have the same problem. There's such healing in being with other emotional eaters. This is such, as I said before, such an isolating condition. We think we're the only ones. I mean, Ben, in my worst state, I would literally take food that I'd thrown out and eat it. Okay. So there's some like bummer things that we do, that are so shameful. And let me explain that a little bit more for those who are listening who might identify. What would happen is I'd be binging, be eating all this food, and then I'd get stuffed. And I'm not a puker, so I never was bulimic. I tried, trust me, but I didn't. I just packed it on and got fat. So after a binge, I can't eat all the foods that I bought, and I'm feeling totally disgusted with myself, eating to that terrible place of being completely stuffed. And then I would say to myself, I'm never eating that again. Like, that is disgusting. Like, I'm never having whatever X was. I throw X out, convinced I will never eat it again. But that's on a full stomach, right? So, a little while later, and I get a little bit of hunger going on, I'm like, let me reconsider that decision. And I go retrieve what I threw out. Well, I did that so many times. I even did a video. I reenacted that whole thing on YouTube 10 years ago. And I got over, I think at this point, it's like 30 or 40,000 hits, of people commenting saying, oh my God, I've done that too. So it's so many people are living in this shame and guilt of their food habits, which are really bizarre and shameful. But when you think you're the only one, it's like you beat the crap out of yourself and feel so bad. It affects your self-esteem. It affects everything in your life. It affects your relationships, your sex life, your work life. If you think about it, it reverberates throughout every part of your life. So when you get to be on a call with people who have done the same things where we can almost laugh about it. I mean, it's kind of funny if it weren't so sad, and it's like it heals something inside of somebody to realize they're not alone. So that community is so important. And that's a big part of my program. So the bottom line is, don't try to do it alone. You won't be able to. You've got to have that community effect. But you also have to know what your real problem is. And the problem with people who struggle with food and weight is they're always doing the dieting thing. And it's proven that 98% of all diets fail. Like 98% of all diets fail. That's an astounding number. If you consider, and you mean
especially long term, because people lose weight, but then they gain it back.
Well, right. So did it work?
Right.
And that's the point is it's, people always gain the weight back. And if they don't address the underlying emotions, the underlying causes, if they don't start changing the way they interact with the world, in my book, and in my program, I talk about something called the anatomy of the emotional eater. And these are personality traits that the emotional eater has. Like, we have this composite of personality traits that really is the crux of the problem. It has nothing to do with food. That's why treating it at the food level is so silly, because that in and of itself isn't a complete picture. That's not going to do it. But if somebody starts addressing these emotional eating qualities like people pleasing, emotional eaters are consummate people pleasers. We get our self-esteem from outside of us and from the kudos we get when we, do extra, at our job, we're taking on an extra load. Well, guess what? When we're taking on an extra load of work so that people will be pleased with us, we end up overworked, overtired, and then what's going to happen? We're going to end up overeating. So that's a typical example of how we're showing up in the world and how that's directly affecting our eating, but it has nothing to do with eating. There's so many, I've actually 24 personality traits that make up the emotional eater. And so that's really what we focus on is dealing, treating ourselves at a deeper level, and also really implementing self-care habits. And emotional eaters are the worst at taking care of their self-care needs because we're always doing, giving, and neglecting ourselves. So a lot of the work I do is teaching people, primarily women. Those are the people who usually respond most to my message. But, teaching women to take care of themselves and put themselves first. That's, people don't get that message. And so that's so important. And it directly affects how much they eat and their food choices.
And how much is this at the root about self-esteem and how you feel about yourself?
It's huge. I mean, if we don't take care of ourselves, it's really because we don't value ourselves. It's like, I say to clients all the time, would you treat your little sweet daughter the way you treat yourself? And the answer is hell no. Would you have your kid skip 2 meals hoping she'd lose some weight? No. But that's what we do to ourselves. We beat ourselves up constantly. And so it's so much about self-esteem. It's so much about those core issues, because if we're not taking care of ourselves, it's because we don't see the value in self-care. Because we are in that process, that cycle of self-denial, putting other people first, thinking we don't matter. So the upshot of people who take my programs is that they start to feel better. They find their voice. One whole part of my program is about speaking up with self-confidence. Emotional eaters don't speak up. They don't say what's on their mind. They're passive aggressive, they're hoping people will read their minds. Then they're pissed off and resentful, and resentment is a great way to justify a binge, like screw them, I'm going to eat myself to death. So it's really important that people start having better communication and speaking up and putting, boundaries on their time and not letting everybody come visit them where they're slaving away for weeks on end for their guests. So many examples of life really affecting our eating habits when it has nothing to do with food.
And do you find a lot of the emotional eaters end up turning to things like plastic surgery as part of this, the self-esteem issue, instead of just really liking themselves or trying to change these things,
Well, it's an obsession with the superficial, and with the symptom.
Right.
The symptom of overeating is overweight. I was 50 pounds overweight. I hated my body. And when you're overweight, you are desperate to do something, and you throw money at it. You're hoping some doctor has the magic pill or some doctor can fix you from the outside. And it's obviously a farce, because it is an inside job. As trite as that is, it absolutely is an inside job. And, people get weight loss surgery, and how sad that makes me.
Yeah, they get liposuction when they're, when they need to lose weight, and it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't, because it's not going to do anything for your cravings. It's not going to do anything for that hole in your soul that you're filling with food, so it's so important, that to know that there's no quick fixes, and that if you really do go to the heart of the matter, if you go inside and do this inner journey of healing emotional eating, if somebody stops emotionally eating, they're going to lose weight automatically. I don't even focus on weight loss, because I know if somebody starts to address, what's driving them to eat, and they're no longer overeating, then they naturally lose weight, and it's not their focus. And that's, to me, that's really, the most holistic way, obviously, to heal this problem. And it's the long lasting way. It's absolutely, you've got to have that self-care. You have to have that community, and you have to do the inner work.
What are some of the forms of self-care that you're thinking about?
I have something called the 6 self-care success secrets that are vital for emotional eaters, and I teach them in my programs. Again, it's hard to do this alone, because even though these things are not going to be earth-shattering, okay? They're things everybody's heard before, but when you're in community with other people who are doing them, it makes it so much easier, because you're getting reinforced. The number one thing is meditation. The thing we all know we should do, right? Well, for emotional eaters, it's actually vital because, we overeat because we're stressed so much of the time. We're natural born worriers. The emotional eaters are overeaters are overthinkers. And so meditation just takes it down several notches. I wouldn't be the size I am if I didn't meditate twice a day because it just helps calm me down. And it basically does for me what I was looking for food to do for me. We reach for food, not just because we love food, but because it calms us down. It gives us that serotonin hit. It helps us even out emotionally. Well, guess what? Meditation can do that. Prayer can do that. Writing in a journal, getting your thoughts and feelings out, getting that anger out, so important. And speaking up for ourselves, so important. I always say it or stuff it, but other things like reading spiritual literature, talking is an important one. We can't stay bottled up with our emotions. We've got to talk and share. And I also find walking to be super important. I do something called a walk pray. It's my own coined term, but every day I walk and I pray. I put my earbuds in my ears and I go for a walk. So it looks like I'm talking to a friend, which I am, but not the friend everybody thinks I'm talking to. But basically the rhythm of walking and prayer helps calm me down. It brings me down, several notches. It helps me not have to worry. And it gives me exercise at the same time, but not exercise where I'm like beating my body up, hoping to force it to lose weight. It's really more meditational and just meditative and calming. And so that's an important tool as well. So those are my 6 self-care success secrets. And they make a huge difference for people who are, nervous and anxious and reaching for food constantly to calm themselves down. And they're probably not even aware of it. They think they just like food like I did. But once somebody starts on this journey, they start to become more aware of how emotional their food choices are.
Great. Excellent, Tricia. For those listening or watching who'd like to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to contact you?
HealYourHunger.com, HEAL, HealYourHunger.com.
That's great.
Yeah, and my quiz is on there, so they can take that emotional eating quiz, find out where they are on the spectrum.
Great, and I'll throw that in the show notes on my website as well.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, enjoyed this talk. I'll talk to you soon, Tricia. Thank you.
Take good care.